there's the direct competitor across the street, the CarMax, Carvana
Correct.
market, independent dealers, other franchise, things like that. But then there is the other major battle for just impressions. And that's when you bring in the third-party portals, and you have to just recognize, like Car Gurus, Cars.com, Auto Trader, no one is going to cease trying to gain impressions and traffic. And so that's the virtual battle, for kind of brand exposure and things like that, that's never going to stop either.
Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Brice Englert, CEO of TradePending. TradePending is building software that transforms dealership websites into high-converting platforms, streamlines the sales process for reps, and drives growth in the service business. In this episode, we discuss how dealers are competing with industry giants like CarMax and Carvana, and uncover the strategies that keep customers coming back. Brice is truly a student of the industry and shared lots of insights. This was a great one. A big thank you to our sponsors for making today's episode possible: TaxMax, Dealer DMV, and of course, TradePending. And now let's get into the show. Brice Englert on the CDP podcast. Brice, welcome.
What's going on? How are you? Thanks for having me.
You tell me. How's life?
Life's good. Super busy, as usual. But year 10 here closing up on TradePending story.
God bless you.
Different busy than year one, but man, I'm really excited that we're here today.
What's changed the most, would you say, in the past decade for you?
Bigger company, bigger teams, bigger projects, bigger customers. I look forward to talking about kind of the startup days. Everybody's got a good origin story or two, and I think I'm probably the rare founder that has stayed around not only to continue to develop organic, but also do some acquisitions work. And today, I think our team continues to get upgraded and be comfortable with the size we are now, and really set the vision for how we're going to continue to double up the company.
You have been pretty acquisitive, and I did notice that 3 acquisitions. I want to get into a lot of what you're working on today, where our industry's headed, what you see as the biggest opportunities for dealerships today, and much, much more. Give us a background first. Start about yourself and your past. How did you get into the space?
Absolutely, and I think it's probably a little different path than some folks, but strange background. I was a very average engineering student who couldn't write a lick of code, but I managed software programs in the Air Force back in the late 90s. So I've kind of been doing this for like 25, 26 years, different environment. Went back to school to try to just give a different area of study and finance technically, but had an opportunity to enter the automotive industry doing M&A work for Dominion Enterprises. The ability to be able to enter the industry as an M&A associate was probably the best job ever. For 2 years, I got to see different companies, meet other entrepreneurs, see their different styles, and it was a very different industry in 2006. Dominion was very active. I think we had 8 acquisitions over the course of about 2.5 to 3 years. Website companies, data companies, fixed op solutions, and that was just a lot of fun, man. I remember walking 800 miles at NADA, approaching a 10x10 booth with small startups known as like Viato, and talking to someone, look back and say like industry stalwarts now, it was awesome.
When you think about the next 10 to 15 years, you just, because you mentioned that, do any specific themes come to mind, or specific companies even, but any themes come to mind as what is that? What are we going to be looking at 15 years and say, wow, I can't believe it? What do you think it is?
I could go the AI route, and how are we going to actually start having technology working for dealerships? A little context, I was actually just at a conference last week, and great guy Glenn Mercer, who I'm sure some of your listeners have seen his data and presentations, has a slide that I've seen multiple times that shows the average car sales person in 1950 sold 10 units per month or 12 units per month, whatever it is. Guess what the average was in 2023? 12 units per month.
So you're saying the average amount of vehicles sold almost a century ago,
per sales rep.
Per sale was 10 units a month, and now you're saying it's 12.
Well, it was the same. It was just like 12 and 12. Yeah. His point is that all the investments in technology and software and solutions has, in that regard, not made, franchise dealerships more efficient. And that always strikes me as it's about time that it does. So if I had to be predictive, dealers are creative, obviously. They've been able to understand how to grow other different profit centers. The technology has met the consumer, where they want to shop and how they shop. Sometimes dealers even get a little bit ahead of that, which is part of my digital retailing thesis. So if I looked ahead in 15 years, I do think there's a role in finally executing on more efficiencies when it comes to Brice, the salesperson's ability in a dealership to deliver units, create relationships.
I think that I'm putting my dealer hat on, right? I feel like there's some conflict of interest. I mean, we all know the term like flood the floor, but I think that as a dealer, unless I am insanely confident that a salesperson can do 50% more output, 100% more output without it coming at the expense of quality, I am not going to put my floor in a position to do more than the average amount of vehicles you just mentioned, right? Because then I say, okay, I can push my salespeople to do 30 cars a month, but the quality will be significantly lower. How much are we going to be missing? So I think what I'd want to see, because the point you mentioned is really profound, what I'd want to see as a dealer would be, can we increase the volume per salesperson? Because then we're more efficient, everyone's making more money, right? Arguably, the pay plans can be, less aggressive because they're making more money they're able to sell more cars on average. But what happens to the quality? And that's where I think how much can tech kind of bridge that gap so that you're spending the time doing what really matters with that customer?
I totally agree. And with the role of OEMs, continue putting pressure on standardizing the way our tier 3 franchise partners are getting to market, communicating with customers, I think there's going to be a more commonized approach than when we entered the market in 2014. And I'll go back to my history in the question. I think that when I was at Dominion, first company that I ran was an email marketing platform. Some of your listeners may remember Auto Revenue with an @ sign, which was retention marketing, did a lot of service marketing. It was the first email marketing provider in the automotive industry. Great founder, John Max Miller. I had big shoes to fill. And at the time, there was no OEM email follow-up program. This is 2008 when I took over the reins there. And then you fast forward 5 years ago, and frankly, most OEM programs wouldn't allow dealers to communicate on generic service reminders and things like that. They took it over, applied a lot of rules, really watered it down. We'll do it for new, we can't do it for used, we'll do it for used CPO. It's just a lot to navigate. The theme I see in the next 15 years certainly is OEM, more involvement. We play well with OEMs at TradePending, but breaking away from Dominion when I did in 2014 and starting TradePending.
I want to build up to present day and what what you see as the next big opportunities, what you're currently working on. Why launch TradePending? What inspired that? What did you, by the way, what did you even, and also what did you do back then? What do you do today?
I found a love for product when I was at Dominion. We launched a few new products, one of which, had just a great loyalty following. It was like reputation management based before Yelp was around, before even Google Places existed. So I loved that challenge, and I had a kind of a passion or hobby for writing business plans. So I remember sitting in a conference room in Indianapolis, being challenged with future casting. Where's the automotive going to be industry going to be? We're looking at a bunch of stats. And I bought the URL TradePending knowing that, hey, you know what? One of the biggest challenges I see is the owned market not flipping cars enough, right? How do we help dealerships lower the ownership cycle, which is never going to happen if we create better cars. But the thesis there is every consumer has a trade pending the right time, right place, right things like that. So it's bigger than a trade tool. Yeah, it was a cheap URL too, by the way. It was so good, another guy in the room bought pendingtrade.com and tried to sell it to me for the next few years. But I never took the bait on that.
If it makes you happy, someone owns cardealershipguy.com, and I passed on it. Too long of a URL anyways, so pass.
You'll be just fine. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job, which, by the way, great work. I feel like you've just stormed the industry. Great content, great education, really good people. That's been fun for me to watch your rise too, by the way.
I appreciate it. I want to build on one of the points you just made, which is the ownership cycle. But before I do that, so you launched TradePending, and then what did you really do back then, and then what do you do today?
Good question. So the vision really was grander than a trade-in tool, and we are a data company that creates software and solutions to connect dealers and consumers better. So the earliest opportunity that I saw was a real mismatch with how dealerships ultimately value a car and how consumers value a car, and that just ancient conflict of Brice has a big asset, it's my car, right? But what I foresaw was really bringing the dealers data, information, and expertise closer to the consumer at any point of the process. For instance, and this comes back to the trade tool, if you ever value a house, how do you do it? You talk to an agent, you base it on comps. A lot of people likened us to kind of Zillow for cars back in the day, because when we introduced our valuation methodology to the market, still today we're the only zip code centric with a radius retail down valuation solution. So as I got to know used car managers over the prior decade and understanding, how acquisition price is really important, certainly in a very rapidly changing used car market, which we saw in the last 3 years quite a bit, we wanted to connect consumers with a more realistic methodology backed by data. And so, every trade lead which we've ever generated, which is well over 10 million these days, consumers understand the supply of their vehicle in a market, what the demand is for that vehicle, and they understand based on comps, where your car may fit the market from a mileage perspective as well. And we show every consumer how we value a car. So there's really no mystique. Starts better conversations. So anyhow, I'll be brief. That was our first vintage and launched in 2014. Me and 2 other guys. We got to 150 customers after the first year, and it was a slog. Yeah, but we pushed through.
So what's your take on, before we talk about kind of other things you're working on today, what's your take on the Carvana value tracker? Because I just had Ernie Garcia on the pod, and as you're saying what you just said, it gave me the idea of, like you said, TradePending, Carvana value tracker, sort of similar thesis of, hey, everyone has a car that would be sold at a certain price. I actually know someone that's doing that for homes as well. They're trying to get you like a daily bid on your home. Anyways, pretty interesting kind of a way to unlock value by monetizing your asset. But anyways, I'm curious to know what your take is on the value tracker.
Thank you for the question, by the way. This fits really. I've been watching value tracker for the last multiple years. It's evolved. I haven't seen the podcast, but I love the way it's included more and more information. Yeah, so. We just launched 6 weeks ago what we call Value Watch. And the thesis behind that is, and I'll skip ahead a little bit, we got into kind of post-transactional services when we bought Fixed Ops Digital, now our service offers product. But it's really clear that dealerships have a lot of investment into selling cars. In the next 10 years of owning a car, they want to retain. And I think that's a big theme that we're going to see in the next 10 to 15 years. He who can retain is going to win. If you cannot retain, if there is switching, then you're going to lose. But in that ownership period, how many times is a consumer going to get a value tracker from Carvana, who's going to have a big Super Bowl ad, I understand? How many times are they going to see a CarMax ad? How many times are other third-party brands, not dealerships, not franchise, going to be trying to go after that vehicle? It is an immense amount of impressions. So we want to equip our dealerships with the same tools that then consumers can get information about their car while they own it without having the specific intent equity mining, lowering my payment by only $25. Just give me the information. I will show you my behavior. You will see, and I will certainly raise my hand when it's time to trade. And the dealers need those cars, of course, and they want to sell the car, and they want to retain the customer. So I'm a big fan, and I think Carvana has given us license to do this today, because if I entered the market 10 years ago, what do you think Yossi dealers would have told me? Hey man, I want to send the value of a car to somebody every month for the next 10 years. They'd probably say, please don't do that.
This episode is brought to you by TaxMax. Tax season is just around the corner, and that means customers are ready to buy, but many are stuck waiting on tax refunds. Enter TaxMax. With the TaxMax File and Drive sales event, you can turn refund checks into same-day down payments starting January 2nd. By using TaxMax, customers can apply for up to $7,000 on the same day they file to use toward their down payment. No need to wait for the IRS, and there's no extra work for your team. TaxMax files the tax return, the dealership receives the down payment, and the customer gets the car all in the same day. Click the link in the show notes below to learn more and use code CARGUY, that's CARGUY, to get 25% off TaxMax VIP program or higher. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think you're essentially, like you use the term Shopify, you're arming the rebels here, right? Where you are pretty much providing this tool, which has been very effective. This is an overall trend. And I think the reason it also became more interesting is because of just, there's so much fluctuation in the market, right? If your vehicle is moving $1 every day, and obviously that's not the case, but in general, it's just less interesting when there's these rapid spikes in vehicle, and EV suddenly prices drop and your car goes down in value or goes up in value, whatever. It's much more interesting, and you want to kind of track the value, but it also provides a great lead mining tool for dealers. and keeping that customer close to you?
The power of this list in 5 years is going to be, immense, right? This is a used car manager's tool. The product that we launched, today, is already stocked full of different context. So I think Value Tracker nailed it, which is kind of how we present. I've always presented information to consumers, which we talk about changes in the market, right? So it's not just mileage and price. There's also a forward-looking view of time, what to expect, or rear view to your point of, hey, your car's up, 6%. But how does that compare to other cars? If my EV's down 8% and every other vehicle's down 0%, I haven't invested in a more depreciating asset than otherwise I could have invested in.
Before I loop back to the point you made earlier on ownership cycle, what else is interesting to you nowadays? And that's sort of a way of saying, what is trade pending, or what are you as a company working on? Because I'm curious to know where you foresee the biggest trends. You did mention retention. Are you building specific tools for that, or?
Yeah, and that Value Watch product is very much the start of a series of product roadmap items to get trade pending involved in that ownership. I call it ownership conditioning. Like, I want to condition you, Yossi, as a good owner of a vehicle, not only to service with me, that's where I can make some money, but to be top of mind when Yossi's going to be going back to the market and thinking about selling, trading, or anything like that. So how do I condition you with information in a relationship, not just trying to hammer you every time I want to do? Another thing that I am a big believer in, and I've seen this in other local business services, is just communication through, more personalized channels. So video. I had an electrician come do some work. Before he arrived, I got a video of him introducing himself. This is all in a simple app. He's just coming by to, I had to get a circuit added or whatever it was. But he's speaking to me. I get to see him. I know who to expect. He just set an expectation of what is going to happen when he arrives. And when he was done, guess what I got? I got a video. Thanks. And, that kind of communication and built up trust gave them license to then ask for, give me a review, right? Can you ask for a referral and things like that? So, the tech is pretty available. In the automotive industry, we've always got to question the integrations and how is this going to work with everything else. That I think thematically, we have to create personalized communication programs for consumers to maximize retention and differentiate Brice's dealership from the Carvanas of the world or other folks out there.
Yeah, look, that's actually a good example of something very simple where it comes down more so to just how do you integrate it into the process so that the team actually does it each time. Frankly, if it works, you'd hope they just do it willingly. They don't have to, but having it fully integrated into your process, your CRM, right. I agree with you. Great trust builder. I love that as well. I've received some of those. They work. You mentioned another point there right at the end, which I missed. What was that? You made a point right after you spoke about video.
Well, I was just talking about differentiating, which is constantly what I think about, versus there's the direct competitor across the street, the CarMax, Carvana market, independent dealers, other franchise, and things like that. But then there is the other major battle for just impressions. And that's when you bring in the third-party portals, and you have to just recognize, like Car Gurus, Cars.com, Auto Trader, no one is going to cease trying to gain impressions and traffic. And so that's the virtual battle, for kind of brand exposure and things like that, that's never going to stop either.
All right, so the point I wanted to make on ownership cycle, which is that I think that there's a world where if you make the process simply a lot easier and better, buying that car, the cars may last longer, but this is America, and there's a reason I drive my car for 2 years, 3 years, and then get a new one, right? Like we want to upgrade, we want the latest, we want new, we want better, whatever. We want bigger family. The point I'm trying to make is like the tools you're talking about right now, I see a world where the more dealers have these capabilities in general, where they're able to provide the value for the customer in real time constantly. They're able to build more trust earlier. It's not one silver bullet, but you do like 3, 4, 5 things over a span of time. And there's no reason that me as a consumer, why I won't consider trading in my vehicle earlier, because it's easy. It's easier. And so that's sort of how I see that ownership cycle kind of contracting. And ultimately that increases sales, across the entire industry. Customers are happy and dealers are happy.
You are conditioning, right? Your consumer to stay top of mind and choose to do business with you, with your sales rep, with your service advisor, with your service tech. Let's face it, a lot of people have their own service tech. That's my preferred person.
So tell me, you mentioned that you think retention will be king here over the next couple of years, decade, whatever time period. I'm curious to know specifically why you think that. there's no doubting that retention is super important. Again, I've mentioned several times the podcast I had with Vince Sheehy, who's really big into retention. He's, in my opinion, it's one of the most impressive retention programs I've had on the podcast, period, if not the most impressive. I'm just curious to know why you think specifically we're entering a time period where it's even more important, because I'll tell you truthfully, coming from a used car background, especially where you have a large percentage of subprime customers and stuff like that, retention is very difficult and you don't think about it as much. Now, in the franchise world, obviously retention is insanely important, especially when we talk about service. That's the next level. I'm curious to know why you think retention is more important than ever.
So two stats, and I didn't prepare, so I hope I get these right. But I know one stat because this was like a founding TradePending statistic. So 80% of used vehicles retailed by franchise dealers last year came from consumers. These don't grow in trees, they're not manufactured. So what is the source of used vehicles? And dealers live and die on the used department by consumer-owned vehicles. So if you take that kind of pool of cars and then apply a scary lens of competition, how am I going to continue to be able to source that given the prior players that we've been talking about already who want to buy that consumer-owned vehicle as well? So couple that stat with this fact, right? So the one big difference between my franchise customers versus CarMax and Carvana is what? They don't service cars. So that gives me license for a majority of period, to be able to go from sales to service retention, provide more information for back to sales to service retention, as well as just basic service retention. So a second stat, I believe this is another Glenn Mercer slide. In 1950, overall service work, about 50% was done through franchise dealers versus independent shops. And last year, and ever since, it's been a steady decline, and I believe last year was closer to 30% of service work is being done in franchise. So is that trend going to continue? I know the independent market, I've got friends with it. It's very aggressive. There's a lot of investment going on from private equity and rolling up these operations too. So that competition is not going to stop. And so if you didn't improve your own retention planning, and I mean not just service retention, service to sales retention, if you didn't invest in that, then you are going to fall victim to that final stat, and eventually you are going to lose that key opportunity in buying consumer-owned vehicles.
I think you hit the nail on the head. So my question that you answered directly was simply that you're right. Everyone is after your customer nowadays. Go back 10 years ago, amount of vehicles purchased from the public directly was a much lower percentage than it is today. I don't know what it was, but the fact is you did not see billboards for "We will buy your car" 10 years ago. Yeah, there was "We buy any car" in CarMax, but it has risen. So everyone is after your customer, yet Carvana, obviously as an example, does not do service. I actually asked Ernie about that. And so that is sort of like, like you said, that is the tool, right, to keep them coming to you, coming back to your dealership, and ultimately retained as a customer. I will mention one more thing that I found super interesting. We just reported on this the other day, but hybrids are actually like the conquest king. So I'll tell you what I mean. It's the percentage of consumers that are buying hybrid, or basically I should say in other words, hybrid customers are not brand loyal, period.
Interesting.
Period. At a crazy astronomical percentage.
Toyota going to change that though, given their hybrid strategy going forward?
Here's the thing, right? So, I posted the stat the other day. I don't have it in front of me, but the stats simply show that hybrid customers are looking for a hybrid wherever they can get their hybrid. They are not brand loyal. And it makes you wonder, it just makes you wonder how stuff like that impacts retention when it's not a level playing field. Not everyone offers every model in hybrid, yet consumers increasingly demand hybrids. Market share keeps rising. It's well over 10% now of new cars sold. That's a record. And so it just makes you wonder, right? What happens next, how that impacts dealers. Something to consider.
Plenty to consider, right? And I think, loyalty is a different definition 10 years ago than 10 years prior, right? And it's not trying to hit some magic number of, service visits per year or, lost souls, i.e. you get them back after 365 days. I think it's going to be a total system of how are we seeding retention, at every key process that we can, and keeping in touch with our customers with good information, not just blasting them with stuff, give them something that's personalized.
I want to talk a little bit about CTA, call to actions and stuff. You put out some content called like the CTA wars. But before we bounce to that, any final thoughts in terms of like how, it's funny because when I was looking through your products in your company, I had this little, you might tell me like I'm dumb, but feel free. I was like, man, like they might want to rebrand from TradePending. Because I thought that,
Yeah.
I was like, wait, I didn't think you had as many solutions as you do. And
Chief marketing officer just collapsed next door, but no, we do need to.
you offer a lot and you're involved in so many parts of the dealership. So I'm just curious to know anything else that's exciting to you when it comes to overall kind of ownership cycle retention before we move on to digital retailing, stuff like that. This episode is brought to you by Dealer DMV. In today's climate, you probably find your dealership selling more and more vehicles out of state. More sales, always a good thing, but then comes time to title and register, and everyone knows how out-of-state titling is a major headache. But it doesn't have to be this way. Our friends at Dealer DMV have created a program called Dealer 50, a revolutionary approach to 50-state titling. With Dealer 50, your dealership now has 24/7 portal access to calculations, pre-filled forms, checklists, inquiries, plus white glove processing and specialist support. You can even acquire duplicate titles in all 50 states directly through the Dealer 50 platform. Did I mention it's DMS integrated? For those of you heading to NADA 2025, don't forget to stop by the Dealer 50 Lounge at the Dealer DMV booth. I'll be at their booth as well on Friday from 11:30 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. Visit dealer50.com, that's DLR50.com, to learn more about this game-changing solution from Dealer DMV, the dealer's DMV.
You know, and that I think is, kind of the nudge. No, but what happens too, and I've seen this with other vendors, with just our trade product that we launched, almost 10 years ago, which continues to have double-digit growth, which is really hard to do, and it has every single year. We've innovated it, we've tweaked it, trying to do different things, but that's in almost 4,000 customers today. So when you have that big of a blessing of a body of customers and a lot of loyal, sometimes you frankly never get out of that. And I do commend companies like Impel, rebranding very successfully from SpinCar, and they deservedly they needed to.
Good example.
They do a lot more than just SpinCar. So I think TradePending is kind of on that cusp. We just bought two other companies a little over a year ago, Snapcell and Fixed Ops Digital, trying to prioritize how we're integrating and doing. I think we're kind of due to your point.
All right, so you put out some content around like the CTA wars. Can you just tell us a little bit about this? What is it? How did it come to be? Like, what are you talking about here?
I think we should start at digital retailing. I know that's on the list.
Let's start higher up and go down funnel.
And I think that'll kind of bleed into some CTA wars. So where to start with digital retailing? I'll kick it off and you feel free to dive in. But we have been supporting digital retailing literally since inception. So our second product to market with TradePending was in 2016. Our API, which gives access to all of our data and values for other third parties. So I remember walking into Joe Chura's office at Dealer Inspire, and he was talking about this online shopper thing they were trying to get up and rolling about 2017. It was a great solution for a few different reasons, by the way, that still, I think, are going to help advance DR in the future. But he understood, and certainly with his retail background, he understood how we valued cars, and we were exclusive with DI's online shopper until Cars.com obviously had some conflicts, but we still work with them and have availability for those customers. But we had that with CarNow's early launch into DR. We had it with Roadster. We had it with Gubagoo. We supported chat. And so since 2017, I think I've had a front row seat of seeing DR adoption and utilization, because I see the calls that are coming through our API, to where we are today. And so TradePending, I've had many customers say, when are you going to create a digital retailing tool? I said, you know what, we have not, because we want to support all of them. And I want more data in digital retailing. I don't want VIN. It's not just clicking through a process that so many people abandon. It's taking me through an experience. And that's going to get our DR payoff in the future. So if you looked at DR adoption, and I think it's a consumer behavioral progression that is also matches with dealership adoption, dealership behavior. We got off of that adoption curve through COVID. And you could see a huge spike in just our API provisions and how that was utilizing. We are coming back down and reverting to that mean, or at least we have the last 12 to 18 months. And I am very excited about the next episode for DR. It's going to have more involvement with OEMs. We have to accept that. For instance, within Toyota Smart Pass programs, there's 2 trade-in values, that are available. TradePending, and the other guy that got started about 100 years ago. That is just another little point of we wanted to create ubiquity around TradePending and our trade values and the trusted brand, the value we can bring, and we've achieved that, which now it's hard sometimes to get other people to recognize, like, how can I use this information and that strategy, in my retention marketing? That's kind of our go forward hope. But I think that digital retailing, has to get away from VIN specificity. And your car guy, how many times did someone come in thinking they wanted to buy this, but they ended up buying that?
But then it reminds me of like the subprime car buying process, right? If you go backwards, and I guess you don't have to start with financing. You could just start with, like you said, don't be so VIN specific. Finish that thought, because I have a question on this as well.
So I believe our payment solution is a great example, and that was an acquisition about 2.5 years ago of Auto APR. And, payments it's kind of a dumbed down name, but in the end, it's an affordability experience. And that needs to be more inclusive in digital retailing. So, let's start with payment. Let's start with what you think you can afford.
Which, frankly, again, if you look at, the CarMaxes, the Carvanas, they really offer that. If you pre-qualify, you sort of do shop like that. Here's my question on DR. So you mentioned we're going to have to get comfortable with going into a world where OEMs are more involved in the process of that digital retailing. That doesn't sit that well with me, because I feel like how can dealers really provide like a cohesive experience that is consistent to the consumer if everyone is forcing me to use their own DR tool? It seems like at the end of the day, I feel like the consumer actually gets hurt, because I am not, right? Like if I have 3 stores, 10 stores, 20 stores, I have 7 different DR tools, but maybe I want to shop cross dealership. It's just not a good cohesive experience. So like, what do we do as an industry? I get it that if I am some automaker, I'm Toyota or whoever, it's better for me. I have better data. I can tailor it a little bit more specifically, but I struggle with that disparate experience. What do you think about that?
So I very strongly consider myself a student of the industry, but 10 years ago, and this goes into CTA wars, websites, were not the wild, wild west. There was a heavy hand by a few different OEMs to use some pretty subpar products. You remember the ones I'm talking about. And so what did dealers do? They had second websites. So that wasn't a good strategy when you look at SEO or just confusing the customer and things like that, but they tried to bury the OEM website and do this. So today, that doesn't exist a lot, right? Is there going to be, to your point, the meat of our market, right? I think these are the smart operators with the 7 to 10 groups. They're refined, they're data hungry, they've got their own CDPs, and they really do need a consistent consumer experience. Will they break up and say, hey, you know what, we're going to have our own, DR experience, supported by a few different vendors and things like that in the future, and just try to bury whatever the OEM's CTAs may be that takes you into their own digital retailing experience? But I think that the conflict between OEMs and dealers is never going to end. It's just going to evolve in different ways. And I think that our philosophy is the data that an OEM wants with any of our solutions, that they should have with permission from dealerships or the OEM program that we participate in. But ultimately, the data is really important for my dealer customer to understand exactly what's going on their website, as well as in the store, what's going on with those opportunities that are getting created.
All right, Brice, I want to move forward. I did notice on your website one thing that stuck out where you said make selling easier. You have a bunch of different tools you offer there. I'm just trying to understand, what are you seeing on when you say make selling easier? What does that really mean? How do you view making the sale easier in a dealership?
Yep. So foundationally, and we've covered how we value cars, the data element, that is really important for me to bring consumers and dealers together through information, and making selling easier is kind of the next, building block. So I can create a lot of opportunities for dealerships through our website conversion suite, but what happens when they're mishandled? So we had to get in the business, and we did get in that business about 5 years ago maybe, when we launched a great product name called Superlatives. No one could pronounce it.
I remember that.
So
dude, I saw that. Because I told you, I was very I used online shopper, and then I looked at you guys. I used all those things. So I remember that. Yeah.
We had a dealer come to us. Actually, I think Brian Pash and Maury's Automotive Group at the time, had come to us and they said, hey, we've seen these Car Gurus guys doing this thumbs up, thumbs down, on pricing, and I think you have that data, which they were right. We did have that data. They said, can you help us out? And we said, give me 2 weeks. And we went back into our data and we recognized, TradePending way is really not just talking about price. The TradePending way is recognizing other market forces within your local market that are going to make something interesting. So we launched Superlatives, which at the time I think maybe there's 25 or 30 different badges, which is why we call it badges now, to put on a dealership's website to talk about what used car managers know. I've got one Toyota Tacoma on my lot, and that is one of only 4 2020s within 50 miles of my dealership. I'm going to tell you that as soon as you start shopping for my one Tacoma. The scarcity is real. And I'm going to tell you if this vehicle has really low miles compared to the other car, because when you call me and say, well, you'll take $2,000 less, the reality is no, you got a cherry. This car is not the same as the others because there's 30,000 fewer miles on it, or high demand, how long it's been on the market. It's these forces that most dealers know that then we finally were merchandising. And it was a great step into making selling easier, because what I saw when I went and visited dealerships is a lot of smart sales folks, when they got the call, were they looking at the piece of inventory that the consumer's calling about? They're looking at their website. And most of those sales reps, while they may be trained on the brand that they're selling new, are they trained on that off-brand 6-year-old vehicle that won 8 awards, back in the day, most reliable? No, they're not. They're really not. We created a passive approach, that I saw people using, which then spun into AutoBio, which is the only product that we've ever named correctly. And the key with AutoBio is it takes the best of badges, but then puts some actual software in the hands of dealership users to be able to send that information proactively to any lead, anyone that's ever engaged. And it has different tracking and information and window stickers and things like that. And so that building block was really augmented well when we bought SnapCell over a year ago, which is largely video for sales customers. We work with the variable side, and now that we have all the data and the tooling to send information, let's add this personalized video and let's make this even more efficient for the dealer to use, which is really key, of course. And now we have an incredibly powerful follow-up system to be able to get further down the road to sale.
People ask me all the time, CDG, can you help me fill an open role in my company? Well, now I can. I'm excited to announce my new industry job board. I've built this job board so that employers in the auto industry can take advantage of my network and distribution. Your company needs roles filled and I have access to talent. It's a win-win situation. This job board is for anyone in automotive, vendors, dealers, lenders, manufacturers, auto tech, you get the point. The best part is that posting roles is 100% free. Over 50 companies have already posted open roles, including Lithia Motors, Recurrent, Credit Acceptance, Cars Commerce, Shift Digital, and over 20 dealer groups. Add your open roles today by visiting my website at dealershipguide.com and clicking on Industry Job Board, or visit the link in the show notes below. I think that's genius. Mike, I'm curious if there's a way for the in-store team. I would love to, if I could just look through all my inventory and see the superlative. Well, I guess I can look at the website if they're all just visible there, but pretty much see the superlative on every single one. It's just, it feels to me like a no-brainer. It's almost, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, it's going to be a bad analogy, but when we create the YouTube titles, we're looking for that key thing. What is this, what is this person an expert at? And what is the most interesting way to encapsulate the episode? It's sort of that. You're looking for that key point that it makes that specific vehicle super unique. And I think that's a powerful sales tool.
We've seen the engagement data on different factoids and things like that, and we've tried to, through machine learning and things, understand what consumers are interested in learning about versus what they're less than interested about, right? And we introduced custom superlatives back in the day, which back to, I think, that 8 or 10 store group that's really trying to differentiate. We could put, the Hendrick Promise, which we did in COVID. We could market they had a unique acquisition of 100 rental trucks, and we helped them, via merchandising, sell those in 60 days, 3-4 years ago through that badges product. But that's the kind of thing you should be thinking about. I mean, obviously gross is super important, but you generate gross by buying the right cars at the right price and then merchandising them uniquely. Every car has a superlative.
Brice, before we wrap up, a couple scattered questions that I've had throughout the episode. Super scattered. So first of all, I have to imagine you're attending NADA. What's your plans for NADA in January?
So big presence, more customers, bigger booth. You got to fit them all, and I hope everybody comes by. Not only are we going to be educating, talking about this kind of ownership conditioning and value watch solution, which we've already launched, but we've got some major kind of enhancements to be able to announce it in NADA as well. We really do want our sizable amount of customers. I want to be, and dealers, they've got to go by this booth because they've got to renegotiate that contract. Our goal is that every single customer comes by TradePending's booth because even if they don't buy anything, they're getting enhanced with whatever product they have with us today. It's going to be busy. Love New Orleans, so I'm excited for the show.
Do you have a booth number that you can share here? Or what's the booth number?
851.
Excellent. TradePending, 851. Second question, completely unrelated. You mentioned you were an engineer before TradePending, right? How were you able to, you made 3 acquisitions, right? I would say many founders are not typically the most acquisitive in business, right? I'm painting it with a broad brush. Typically it's the more corporate CEO or private equity experience that goes. Now you've done 3 acquisitions. So you've stayed curious and you've capitalized on opportunities. Just how, why? Walk us through your thinking of your growth mindset with this company.
100%. So we recapitalized in December 2020 and brought in our first investment through our private equity partner, the Cap Street Group out of Houston, which I think they've probably been the most active investor in automotive in the last 4 years, but they're kind of they're the finance guys behind the products and innovations that their companies can have. But what I saw was a financial partner that could allow us to accelerate our growth with these inorganic investments. So I love launching new products. I don't want to launch 2-3 new products every year. Usually when you're product launching, it's going to be very adjacent to what you do. Like I've kind of explained with trade and badges, you can see those adjacencies. But if you can find a company that has market acceptance, they've got that 400 or 500 customers, but man, it's really hard to build out a big sales team, right? It's really hard to have such a great marketing engine like we have. That's a good inorganic opportunity to do an acquisition and immediately accelerate your roadmap and then bring those parts together. So the fact that we've been able to do 3 over the course of, I think 3 years, really we have been active and will continue to be. We kind of hit our goals on that, which was pretty darn exciting. But my time at Dominion, not only through my M&A work that we talked about before, but also observing how to integrate companies and products or not integrate them, I really felt like A, it would be a very good challenge that me and my team are up for, and B, I just thought that we could take I think the positive brand image, trust that we've established with our dealer customers, and say, hey, we think this is really transformative, and I hope you do too. And we've got a lot of good fortunate relationships that have allowed us to continue to expand kind of wallet share or just the things that we're able to do for our customers.
Great, Brice. This has been awesome, super insightful. So you're definitely a student of the business. Before we wrap up, any closing thoughts?
No, just thank you for taking the jump into car dealership guy.
We do have our NADA party, which we're super excited about, which I'd love to see you there.
I hope I get an invite, please.
Well, you better be there, so you will get it. Of course you will. But yeah, it's going to be fun. So that's going to be Friday night around 8 p.m. So we're looking forward to that. Friday, of course, during NADA. So that's all on my end. Brice, thank you so much for coming on. You are a wealth of knowledge, and this was super insightful.
Yossi, thanks, man. Great job. Keep it up.
Appreciate it.
I look forward to seeing you in New Orleans.